We have a 7. Delia is leaving. Okay. Okay. Delia isn't leaving, so. All right. I am hoping to be able to take care of 2 items out of 3. The first one is governance manual, citizen participation. And as you know that recently there was an AG opinion on what we can and we cannot do as part of our efforts to limit certain expressions during the citizen participation. And this has been already in practice. The practice right now we are doing has already incorporated AZ's opinion. So this is just a matter of reflecting our current practice based upon recent AZ opinion. So if you just look at what the governance committee unanimously proposed to change the language in the governance manual, there should not be a whole lot of need to debate on this one. Mr. Foster, you want to add anything to what I said?
Mr. Moon. Thank you. Mr. Moon, if you could cursor down a little bit further in the document.
Further down, okay.
That starts with speakers are encouraged to be respectful and should refrain from personal attacks on any person. So just to go back a little bit to what the AG opined earlier this year, I opined on 2 things. First, as Mr. Moon mentioned a minute ago, many school divisions, including ours, had policies or practices that basically said that personal attacks on employees or personal criticism of specific employees was not permitted. And the Attorney General ruled that that's a violation of the First Amendment rights of speakers during citizen comment time. And so this revision to the governance manual basically is consistent with that and has taken out any reference to prohibiting people from criticizing or commenting on specific employees, but it's aspirational here in the red. What it talks about is speakers are encouraged to be respectful and to observe decorum. So we're encouraging people to do that, but again, to be clear, under the law, we no longer can prohibit them from criticizing or commenting on the performance of individual employees. The AG had a second piece to his opinion, and that was on specific students and identifying or criticizing or commenting on specific students. The AG, in that part of his opinion, said that school divisions can continue to do what they've done, which is really to prohibit or discourage commenting on individual students, and instead any comments or concerns about individual students should be directed toward the principal of that particular school that the student attends. And so that is also laid out in the blue further up in the suggested revisions to the governance manual.
Okay, I have Mr. Schultz to be followed by Mrs. Strauss. I'm sorry, before we do, Mr. McAlpin was first.
Thank you. So now I'm the person who actually requested this change in governance. Personal attacks on any person is repetitive. It could be either refrain from personal attacks or refrain from attacks on any person. I don't think we need personal in person. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
Mine's just very simple. When the chair or whoever is conducting the meeting reads the statement from the dais, is that the statement they're going to read?
It would be that or something similar, yes.
Okay. I know what racial epithets are. I don't know that if you have that as, and I'm not encouraging dumbing down our language. I just would like somebody to think about, you know, maybe just a little slightly, especially because we have a very diverse population. Something like racial epithets or something, not slurs. That's like, but I just, if we're gonna read something, I'm just saying, and we don't have to change this here. I don't have any problems, and I'm glad Mr. McElveen picked that one part. But I just would encourage maybe a little tweak if we're going to be reading it from the table.
I have a Mr. Strauss.
I'm assuming that with the Attorney General's opinion, the issue of defamation of character, then we are absolved. I mean, somebody could come up and really say something horrible about an employee, but then we are not liable for defamation of character.
That's correct. We're not making the statement, and this is in a to get down into the weeds of First Amendment analysis. This is what's called a limited public forum, and so to answer your question, Ms. Strauss, we don't have any liability for defamation. That would be between the target of the criticism and the speaker, between the two of them.
So I guess that's a question, whether or not that is a disclaimer to warn people that they could be liable for defamation of character from what they say in that public setting. And I'm assuming they could be liable.
Yeah, we don't have a legal duty to warn people, quite frankly, against their own stupidity. And we have to be careful because I don't want the board to assume a duty that it doesn't have.
Right.
But certainly, if you want us to look into that further, we can.
Well, because my question is that employees need to know that they have some protection against, public defamation. I mean, that would be my only concern, but I don't know. I was sorry when I saw this coming from the Attorney General, but I understand,
I don't want the school board to be in a position to be giving out legal advice.
Okay, I get it.
to,
But I'm sorry for employees who might be skewered. So,
Can Mrs. McLaughlin?
I was served on governance, so I support this. I guess going to where Ms. Schultz was on this, whether it would be racial insults, bigotry, something that just kind of racial insults. I mean, something that I think she's correct that epithet just might not translate to everyone understanding what we meant. That might just be a little more straightforward language, that's all. But otherwise, I think it's important.
Do you think that derogatory comments might work? Racially derogatory comments?
Sure, that would work too.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, if not, based upon Mr. McAlveen's suggestion to delete that personal from third line, we'll make the change, and then epithets will become, racial epithets will become racially derogatory comments or racially derogatory remarks.
We don't have to change it here.
And with that, can we accept the changes? Okay, let's see, with a show of hands, just to be clear. All right, thank you. We are not gonna put this as a new action until we are done with, there are more changes coming up, just, with the strategic plan, there are more language changes coming up. When those are ready to come to the, regular action, a regular board meeting as a new business, and then action, then we'll take care of this at that time together rather than doing in a piecemeal. So with that, I'm hoping that we can, in 10 minutes, we can complete the next item, which is a school board recognition of outstanding student teams, ensembles, and publications. This is a one-page draft document, straightforward, and then I'll ask Mr. Marty Smith to explain what is in there.
Sure, certainly, Mr. Moon. Earlier this year, the school board asked Dr. Garza to create guidelines for recognizing students, student accomplishments, first place honors in team, ensemble, and other types of group activities. Initially, it was for individual students, but as we looked at the numbers of students that the board might be recognizing, we would be here longer than we were today recognizing students. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm still here at 7, and I'm happy to be here. So we did reach out to the Board of Supervisors. We wanted to model this on some of the work that the Board of Supervisors do when they recognize students. They really had no formal process. It was basically catch as catch can. If something came to a board member's attention, they would put it on the agenda. We then reached out to school districts across the country to find out what some practices they use for their school boards to recognize students, and we're able to develop these guidelines. These are guidelines that will go into the governance manual, and we will also then place them in the regulations manual so that our public can have access to them, because there's a component where they will recommend students, teams to be recognized by the school board. I'm not going to go through the entire document, but I'm going to give you a few of the highlights. It's a process where the board would recognize students for first place honors in state, national, and international competitions for FCPS recognized clubs. The board would also recognize those VHSL competition winners for teams, ensembles, and student publications. And again, that's for groups, not for individuals. The students will be recognized at the first meeting of each month. And then based on the numbers of students recognized, the school board could either start that meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening or add an additional meeting to the schedule to recognize students. And something that came out of the last governance meeting, we added that to the document to focus on international competitions, as well as focusing on the fact that there might be some individual or unique circumstances where individual students will be recognized, such as the Intel search, talent search, where if we had a Fairfax County student who won the Intel talent search, that we might want to recognize that individual student at the school board level. So that's a very quick presentation of the work that we engaged in and have worked with governance to get to the form that it is in today.
So this comes as a governance committee's unanimous recommendation. And my take on this one is, let's start with something. This may not be the perfect way to go, but until we actually do this, start doing it, we may not know how to adjust to this yet. So rather than trying to find the perfect solution for every possible scenario tonight, let's have whether, if it can, in general, if you do not have a huge objection, major harp on any of one of these line items, my recommendation is for us to adopt this and make adjustments as we go along. With that, I have Mr. Schultz and Ms. Evans and Mr. Strauss.
So if you can just slide down a little bit on the slide or make it a little bit smaller. So really the only thing I can see right off the bat that I sort of have a little bit of heartburn with, you say the first regularly scheduled meeting of each month. That means every other meeting. I mean, that's every other meeting, and I think that's way too often. First of all, you think about September. I maybe there's going to be ones in September, but school's just starting, so that's not likely. To me, it would be, and we don't have to ascribe to the certain months, but I think we ought to say, we ought to pick, and it ought to be built into our calendar that these are the meetings, and you pick, meeting in December, a meeting in February, a meeting in March, and it's set out, and those meetings do start 1 hour early because we are doing recognitions, and that way it's sort of built into the system instead of catch as catch can. But I think every other meeting doing this or having this set aside, it leaves far too much. There's way too much give in that, and it's just going to be a roller coaster of 1 month. Like, are we starting early? Are we not starting early? I'd rather just build it into our existing calendar at certain intervals, and whether it's every other month or certain months or exact meetings, which is, I think, potentially the best.
And we have looked at it quarterly, and we can take another look at that.
Quarterly, and I get that we're not going to be perfect from out the gate, but not every other meeting.
I'll ask my colleagues' thought on that one a little bit later on, whether it's a monthly or once every other month, once every quarter. So I'll get your with the raising your hand, I'm going to ask for your opinion. So I'll go to Ms. Evans.
Just a couple of questions. The word ensemble, is that just another word for group, or does it have a specific meaning?
For a musical group or a theater group. So when we look at ensemble, it's for a group of students. All of these recognitions would be for groups of students.
Okay. And so the application at the end, is the application just for individual students? Is that an application for the
No,
exceptions that we were talking
No,
about, or
this
is that
is
for
this is the application for consideration for those groups or ensembles.
for those groups? Okay.
But if somebody felt that there were an individual student who needed to be recognized, the same process could be used. It would all go through the board clerk, and then would most likely be discussed at a chairman's meeting, I would imagine.
Well, then I would suggest that we amend that to say individuals may recommend groups of students for recognition, if that's what we're talking about, because I think the way it reads as though you're asking for the exceptions for individual students.
Okay, we can
And
change.
so then the other thing is, I do agree with Mrs. Schultz, and maybe the best way to do that would be to say recognize student, maybe just say periodically, and leave it up to when it fits into our agenda. You know, I don't know that we even need to say quarterly. If
Okay, we'll come to that. Come
Okay.
back to that.
And then the last, I just wanted to make a point that, thank you, by the way, for governance doing this. There are other ways that we have in our strategic governance manual, just for those who aren't aware, to recognize. You can get a letter signed, by the board, by the chair. So anyway, just to make sure that people know there are other ways to deal
Sure.
with other recognitions.
Okay, and I have a Mr. Strauss.
I would, I would recommend that when we talk about state competitions, we also might consider Metro, because you have both arts and athletics that our kids are recognized through a Metro competition. Cappies is one. Also, the athletic. Yes, it's regional.
So say regional.
You're regional, yeah. And also you have athletic recognitions, all Met team, etc.
My suggestion to that is, if you're using it CAPI as an example, at the year's end, it will be,
Right.
that's a large number.
Well, but
You have like a 40 different categories.
but
And
it depends on the particular final award for a school. You may have 2 or 3.
so,
Well, it just as a possibility seems
okay,
appropriate.
and also that could come down to where individuals or
That was my
something
next-
that not
that was
belonging
my
here
next
could be
question.
recommended.
Yes, because if it's a particularly distinguished, if you win play or musical, that's really, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Huff, and hopefully any other board member, because it's a 7:00. Okay, I have a Mrs. Huff, and then I'll go to Laura, and then I'll have Mrs. Schwartz for to go back, and then we'll call that quit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this. I think this is a great idea. I'm glad we're going to do this. I like the idea of having some incremental times that we do this, and with the starting early. And really the only thing I want to add is I would wonder if we could consider that for all the kinds of resolutions and recognitions that we do, if when we group them together, if we can consider starting that time early so that when it's an hour and a half, that by the time we're getting to our actual business, it's already getting pretty late. So I would advocate for that for this and other recognitions.
Okay, I guess that's required a discussion at some other time, what you're suggesting. And so I have a Laura.
So I don't know if I misunderstood. I just wanted to clarify with recognizing the students. Would it be like the same process of recognizing employees where you would kind of state the facts and then have them come to the front, pictures? Because I do agree that with timing, it's not something that seems to be really feasible sometimes because our students have so many accomplishments. And I know Langley High School, for example, was named first for their Model United Nations teams. So the Board of Supervisors invited them down for an entire day just to recognize them. And I just think that trying to go through that list is rough. And I don't know if it would be appropriate or efficient, but if it would be helpful at all for Student Representative Matters, if there could be any way to more efficiently recognize these students, I can try to help in that. to bring that to the
So
table?
we're not going to force anyone. You as a student representative can, as a part of your student representative matter, can announce accomplishments of any group or any individual student. And so we're not going to force any group of students or individual to come to the school board meeting for the recognition. Those who want to be recommended, desire to be recommended, will be applied for and then come to us.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Okay. Okay, with that, Mr. Schultz.
Just one other thing. I think it's not a great idea to put specific times in regulations or policies, because we could change our meetings. We could. I think it's a bad idea. You could say that school board meetings may begin early. I mean, I just would say may begin early, because they may not. And what's early? It's all relative. So I think it's a very bad idea to have exact times.
Okay, so hopefully within 2-3 minutes, we can all come to a resolution of outstanding issues, which is how often will we do this recognition? As presented up there is a monthly, once a month. Another suggestion is once a quarter. Another suggestion is once every other month, or another suggestion was as needed basis, basically.
Let's start with periodically and see if we have.
So periodically as needed basis. If you, I guess they will leave that up to the chairman to schedule it. Then, if you support it, raise your hand. Okay, that carries the day. Okay, thank you. So we'll make the change. And second is, I think this should be easy with 6 p.m. We'll begin at 6 p.m. May say the meetings may begin early. Is that acceptable? Okay, raise your hand. Okay, that is done. And what would be a change the language under C, application for consideration? There was a suggestion to change the language.
I can just say teams, ensembles. I can just repeat the
Okay.
language.
Is that acceptable to everybody? Raise your hand. Okay, so with those changes, this will become a part of our governance manual and also become a regulation. We're not going to vote on this at the school board meeting. With that, this governance work session is adjourned and timetable dinner.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. And now I think I need to read a resolution about going into closed meeting, right? Okey-doke. All right. The board will now make a motion to go into closed meeting to consult with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7. Do I have a motion by Mrs. Schultz, seconded by Ms. Derenak Kofax? All in favor? Raise your hand. That's unanimous, so we go into closed session. Thank you.